Gentleman yields. The chair recognizes Mr. Davidson.
I thank the chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being willing to come back, and I'm quite excited to be able to get in under the deadline here. So, Mr. Secretary, I think, for my lifetime, we've kind of been in this back and forth. It's border security, it's immigration, border security, immigration. As we've seen today, the two parties don't really agree much on those two solutions. I can't say that it's been an incredibly productive dialogue on this. We haven't changed anybody's minds, I don't think. But I hope we can at least agree to stop the cartels. The cartels are bad people. They're doing evil things, and they're exploiting our broken laws, and they're causing many of the disastrous situations in Mexico, Central and South America. Last summer, I introduced a bill, the Stop the Cartels Act. I've subsequently renamed it the Lizzie Murphy Act to stop the cartels, named after a 21-year-old young lady in my district, daughter of a good friend, who took a Xanax at a party that was laced with fentanyl. And like tens of thousands of other Americans, she died because the drugs she took, not a good idea, but they're not supposed to kill you. Poisoned with fentanyl, and it ended her life tragically. As I was introducing that bill last summer, the New York Times introduced independent reported journalism and said that under Trump, there was a problem at the border. The cartels were exploiting, and they were making around $500 million a year smuggling people across the border. And that's a pretty big problem. But in a year and a half into the Biden administration, as of last summer, it was over $13 billion. Now, I was a businessman before I got into Congress. 26x your business in a year and a half, I mean, that's insane. $13 billion of growth. Another year on, and the problem's only gotten worse. In your expert opinion, as a former Secretary of Homeland Security, how can we most effectively stop the cartels?
Well, Congressman, I agree with you. I think the cartels should be public enemy #1 for the United States. There's no other driver that kills 100,000 Americans every single year, particularly as it relates to fentanyl. I think, as I've said repeatedly, and I've been questioned, all options should be on the table when it comes to the cartels. What we have done historically is treated this issue as a law enforcement issue. And I would say that we have made incremental improvements around the edges, but we have not addressed the issue. You also need to provide leverage, and you need an administration willing to use the leverage against the government of Mexico. When this administration and this president says, I will never designate them as a foreign terrorist organization, I will never use military force, I will never do X, Y, and Z, it takes all the leverage that they would normally have, and government of Mexico officials are going to say, well, I don't need to do anything else because there's no repercussions. There's nothing that is going to severely impact me. So there's a number of things that you could be doing along that border. And with the leverage that we have, foreign assistance, which I know is important to this committee, and other things, there are leverage points that the U.S. government could be using to get more action and activity out of the government of Mexico, and we're not doing it.
Thank you. I do hope we can reframe the debate so we can at least agree to stop the cartels. As far as I know, there's no pro-cartel lobbyists here in D.C. Now, I will say there are no Republican-led sanctuary cities, and that's kind of a pro-cartel activity. So I'm concerned about that. It would be highly more effective, though, if people in Mexico and Central America, South America, solved their problems domestically. That would take away the whole credible fear claims that end up showing at our border, correct? So it seems like there's unanimous consent there by our witnesses. And I just wonder, in El Salvador, probably not something that would go over well with our Bill of Rights in America, but seems to be pretty effective. Looks pretty peaceful and safe for people that aren't causing harm to their neighbors. Does anyone feel like what's going on in El Salvador has been effective?
In the short term, yes. Ask in 5 years. I do worry about a permanent state of emergency and what that does, and when there's no checks and balances on presidential power.
Okay.
I think what President Bukele has done in El Salvador is a miracle. And you should, in every Western country across the world, we should target criminals and gangs and cartels, round them up and detain them, and incarcerate them for as long as we can.
I think what's also very illustrative about El Salvador is about a third of their GDP comes from remittances here in the United States. And so we've got to deal with this issue. I certainly agree with what he's doing regarding criminals, but we've got to provide other incentives for these countries to retain their talent, to retain their.
Yeah, and I'm
young
sorry, my
individuals.
time's running out. And look, I think that's right. And I think, look, I'm encouraged by developments in Ecuador and Argentina. And we've got a lot of promise in this Western Hemisphere as we close in on the 100th anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. I hope we protect our own backyard. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Ms. Jacobs.